The crystal walls of the Galactic Defense Coalition's main meeting room sparkled with 1,000 colors as representatives from 47 different species gathered for the monthly session. Commander Zethkar of the Velthari stood near the back, his translucent body catching the light from the room's energy sources. His species had evolved on a world where the worst natural disaster was a gentle breeze that might blow flower petals around. At the front of the room, Admiral Corksfin, a tall being with 4 arms and skin like polished metal, called for attention. "We have an important announcement today," the Admiral said, his voice carrying through the universal translators that every species wore. "The Coalition has approved a new military exchange program." Captain Nix floated near the ceiling, her gaseous form contained within a clear environmental suit. The Etherians had never known physical conflict on their homeworld. Their wars were fought with words and ideas, settled through peaceful negotiations that could last for centuries. She drifted down closer to hear better. "This program will allow our finest military officers to observe and learn from other species," Admiral Corksfin continued. "We believe this will strengthen our unity and improve our combined defense capabilities." Commander Zethkar raised one of his crystal appendages. "What species will be participating in this exchange?" "All Coalition members are welcome to volunteer," the Admiral replied. "However, we have received a particularly interesting request from the newest members of our alliance." He paused for effect. "The humans of Earth." A ripple of quiet conversation spread through the room. The humans had only joined the Coalition 6 months ago, after their first contact with galactic civilization. Most species still knew very little about them, except that they came from what the scientists called a Class 12 death world. Captain Nix had read the basic reports about Earth. The planet was covered in vast oceans of dangerous liquid water, had an atmosphere that could support combustion, and experienced weather patterns that included frozen precipitation and electrical storms. It sounded like a nightmare world to her, but the report said humans had somehow not only survived there, but thrived. "The humans have offered to host the first exchange," Admiral Corksfin announced. "They wish to demonstrate their military training methods to Coalition observers. This is an excellent opportunity to learn about our newest allies." Commander Zethkar's crystal structure brightened with interest. The Velthari military was based on precision and technology. Their soldiers fought from climate-controlled vehicles, using energy weapons that required no physical contact with enemies. The idea of learning new techniques was appealing, especially from a species that had survived on such a hostile world. "I volunteer to participate," Commander Zethkar announced. "As do I," Captain Nix added, her voice creating small vibrations in her containment suit. Admiral Corksfin nodded approvingly. "Excellent. We will also send technical observers and medical staff to ensure your safety. The humans have assured us that their training methods are what they call basic level and suitable for observation by allied species." 3 weeks later, Commander Zethkar and Captain Nix stood on the surface of Earth for the first time. The experience was overwhelming. The sky was blue instead of the gentle purple they were used to in space stations. White formations called clouds drifted overhead, and something called wind moved the air around them constantly. "This world is so active," Captain Nix observed, her environmental suit working hard to filter the alien atmosphere. "How do the humans concentrate with all this movement and noise?" Commander Zethkar was studying his readings. The gravity is 1.2 times standard Coalition gravity. The atmospheric pressure is significantly higher than recommended levels. And according to my sensors, there are thousands of different chemical compounds in the air. They were standing at the entrance to something called Fort Benning, which their human liaison had explained was a basic training facility. The buildings were made of simple materials like concrete and metal, not the advanced composites that most civilized species used. Everything looked rough and unfinished compared to the smooth, perfect structures of Coalition worlds. "Welcome to Fort Benning," said a human approaching them. He was wearing what humans called a uniform, simple clothing in green and brown colors that seemed designed to help him blend into the natural environment. "I'm Drill Sergeant Martinez. I'll be your guide during this exchange." Commander Zethkar studied the human carefully. Drill Sergeant Martinez was relatively small compared to some Coalition species, standing only about 2 meters tall. His skin was darker than the pale humans they had seen in the diplomatic meetings. and it showed signs of what appeared to be damage from their sun's radiation. His body looked solid and dense, adapted for the high gravity of this world. "We are honored to observe your training methods," Commander Zethkar said politely. "We understand this is what you call basic military preparation." Drill Sergeant Martinez smiled, showing his teeth in what humans considered a friendly expression. "That's right. This is where we take civilian volunteers and turn them into soldiers. Nothing too complicated, just the fundamentals every human needs to know." Captain Nix was scanning the area with her sensors. "We detect numerous life forms in the vicinity. Are these dangerous creatures that threaten your training?" "Those?" Martinez looked where she was pointing. "That's just some squirrels and birds. Completely harmless, although..." He paused, studying their environmental suits and delicate structures. "I have to ask, so what kind of physical capabilities do your species have? Any medical conditions I should know about?" "Physical capabilities?" Commander Zethkar was confused by the question. "We operate advanced military equipment. Physical capabilities are not relevant in modern warfare. The Velthari have perfect environmental control in all their military operations," Captain Nix added. "And my species exists in carefully maintained atmospheric conditions. We are both highly advanced civilizations with sophisticated technology." Drill Sergeant Martinez nodded slowly, but something in his expression suggested he was not entirely convinced. "Right. Well, let me show you to your observation area. We'll start with some basic orientation tomorrow morning." As they walked through the facility, the two alien officers noticed strange details everywhere. The humans seemed to build everything to withstand damage, rather than prevent damage from occurring. The buildings had thick walls and small windows. The pathways were made of hard substances that would hurt to fall on, rather than the soft, cushioned surfaces used on civilized worlds. Sergeant Martinez, Commander Zethkar asked, "Why is everything here constructed so roughly?" "Roughly?" Martinez looked around as if seeing the base for the first time. "This is pretty standard construction. Built to last, easy to maintain. Soldiers need to be able to operate in all kinds of environments, so we don't want them getting used to anything too comfortable." That evening, the two aliens sat in their specially prepared quarters, reviewing their initial observations. Their rooms had been modified with the environmental controls they needed. But even so, they could hear strange sounds from outside, wind moving through trees, distant mechanical noises, and something called insects that apparently made noise for no logical reason. "The humans seem pleasant enough," Captain Nix observed, "though I notice they appear to have been physically damaged by their environment." "Did you see the marks on Sergeant Martinez's hands and face?" "I believe those are what they call scars," Commander Zethkar replied. "Evidence of injuries that healed. It suggests they regularly experience physical trauma as part of normal life." "How disturbing," Captain Nix said. "Though I suppose it explains why they survived on such a hostile world. They must have developed incredible medical technology to heal from such injuries." Neither alien realized that what they had observed were simply the normal wear and tear of an active human life. Small cuts, sun exposure, and calluses from work. They had no frame of reference for a species that routinely experienced minor physical stress and simply adapted to it. "Tomorrow we will see their basic training methods," Commander Zethkar said. "I am curious to see how a species from a death world approaches military preparation." "It should be educational," Captain Nix agreed. "Yes, it will be interesting to see how they compensate for their primitive technology and harsh environment. Perhaps we can offer them some improvements to their methods." Outside their window, they could hear human voices in the distance, young recruits talking and laughing as they prepared for the next day's training. The sound seemed strange to the aliens, who were used to the quiet efficiency of advanced civilizations. They had no way of knowing that those casual conversations were taking place between individuals, who would soon demonstrate physical and mental capabilities that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about the limits of biological life forms. As they prepared for sleep in their environmental chambers, both aliens felt confident about the coming days. They were experienced military officers from advanced civilizations, here to observe the primitive training methods of a recently discovered species. How difficult or impressive could it possibly be? The sound that woke Commander Zethkar and Captain Nix was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was loud, harsh, and seemed designed to cause immediate stress. Their environmental systems registered it as some kind of alarm, but it was coming from the human barracks, not an emergency warning system. "What is that noise?" Captain Nix asked, her gaseous form swirling nervously in her containment suit. Commander Zethkar checked his time display. "It is 0400 hours. Why would an alarm sound at this time? There is no logical reason for military personnel to be active before dawn." Through their reinforced windows, they could see lights turning on in the human barracks. Dark figures began moving around, and soon they heard voices. Not panicked voices responding to an emergency, but normal conversation. The aliens watched in confusion as dozens of young humans emerged from their sleeping quarters and began forming organized lines drill. Sergeant Martinez appeared at their door, wearing the same type of uniform as yesterday, but he looked completely alert despite the early hour. "Good morning," he said cheerfully. "Ready to observe some basic PT?" "PT?" Commander Zethkar asked. "Physical training," Martinez explained. "We start every day with exercise. Keeps the soldiers in shape." Captain Nix was scanning the area with her sensors. "Exercise? At this hour? In these environmental conditions?" The temperature outside was what humans called cold. Frost covered the ground, and the aliens could see their breath-forming clouds when the humans exhaled. On any civilized world, such conditions would require protective gear and environmental suits. "This is perfect weather for PT," Martinez said. "Nice and crisp. Really gets the blood moving." The aliens followed Martinez to an observation area where they could watch the human recruits. What they saw next challenged every assumption they had about intelligent life forms. The humans were standing in perfect lines, wearing only thin clothing that provided minimal protection from the cold. Steam rose from their bodies as they breathed, indicating they were losing heat at a dangerous rate, yet none of them seemed concerned about this obvious threat to their survival. "All right, listen up," shouted a human wearing slightly different clothing. "Time for morning PT. We're going to start with a nice easy warm-up run." "A run?" Commander Zethkar whispered to Captain Nix. They cannot mean actual physical locomotion using their legs, but that was exactly what they meant. The entire group of humans began moving forward at a speed that would be considered dangerous for most coalition species. They were not using any vehicles or assistance devices. They were simply using their own biological systems to propel themselves across the ground at high speed. "This is impossible," Captain Nix said, her sensors working frantically to analyze what she was seeing. "They are operating outside safe environmental parameters. The impact stress on their skeletal systems alone should cause immediate structural failure." Yet the humans continued running. Not only that, but they seemed to be enjoying it. The aliens could hear them calling out songs and chants as they moved. Their voices were strong and clear, showing no signs of the respiratory distress that such activity should cause. "How far will they run?" Commander Zethkar asked Martinez. "Just a couple miles for warm-up," Martinez replied casually. "Nothing too strenuous this early in the morning." "Miles?" The aliens had to quickly convert the human measurement system. When they realized the humans planned to run approximately 3.2 kilometers, both aliens' emergency medical systems activated automatically. "Should we not alert their medical staff?" Captain Nix asked. "This level of physical stress could cause permanent damage." Martinez looked confused. "Medical staff? For a morning run? These are healthy young people. A little exercise is good for them." After what seemed like an impossibly long time, the humans returned from their run. The aliens expected to see signs of severe physical trauma, broken bones, damaged breathing systems, or at minimum, complete exhaustion. Instead, the humans looked slightly warm and appeared to be breathing a bit faster than normal. "All right, everybody down for push-ups," the human instructor called out. The aliens watched in horror as the entire group of humans threw themselves toward the ground. For a moment, Commander Zethkar thought they had finally collapsed from the running, but then he realized they were deliberately placing their bodies in contact with the cold, hard surface. "They are voluntarily subjecting themselves to ground contact," he observed. "In these temperatures, prolonged contact with the surface could cause tissue damage." But the humans were not just lying on the ground. They were repeatedly lifting and lowering their bodies using only their arms. The aliens could see the muscles in their shoulders and arms working as they performed this exercise dozens of times. "How many repetitions will they perform?" Captain Nix asked. "Standard is 50 for this group," Martinez answered, "though some of the stronger recruits might do more." 50 repetitions of deliberately stressing their muscular systems while in contact with freezing ground. The aliens began to understand why humans had survived on a death world. They were apparently immune to physical laws that affected normal life forms. The exercise session continued for what the humans called an hour. The aliens watched as the recruits performed activities that had no names in any civilized language. They lifted heavy objects above their heads repeatedly. They ran in place while raising their knees to impossible heights. They lay on their backs and repeatedly contracted their abdominal muscles while other humans held their feet down. This appears to be systematic torture, Commander Zethkar observed quietly. Are these recruits being punished for some violation of military law? Torture? Martinez heard the comment and laughed. This is just basic fitness training. Every soldier needs to maintain minimum physical standards. This is actually pretty light compared to what they'll be doing later in the program. Later? Captain Nix's voice rose in pitch. This intensity will increase? Sure, Martinez said. This is just week 1. We start easy and build them up gradually. By the end of basic training, they'll be in the best shape of their lives. As if the morning exercise was not disturbing enough, what happened next completely shattered the aliens' understanding of military training. The humans were led to an area that Martinez called the obstacle course. The aliens looked at the course with growing alarm. It consisted of barriers that humans would have to climb over, ropes they would have to climb up, and worst of all, an area where they would have to crawl under metal wire while staying close to the ground. This appears to be a deliberate hazard designed to cause injury, Commander Zethkar said. The confidence course? Martinez looked surprised. It's perfectly safe. Well, as long as they follow proper procedures and keep their heads down during the low crawl. Low crawl? Captain Nix asked. Martinez pointed to the section with metal wire stretched between posts. The space underneath was barely high enough for a human body. They have to crawl under that barbed wire on their stomachs. Builds character and teaches them to stay low under fire. The poor aliens watched in fascination and horror as human after human threw themselves onto their stomachs and pulled themselves forward using only their arms, dragging their entire body weight across rough ground. Above them, sharp metal wire waited to tear their skin if they raised their heads too high. This is insane, Captain Nix whispered. No rational being would voluntarily subject themselves to this. But the humans were not just surviving the obstacle course. They were competing with each other to complete it faster. The aliens could hear them encouraging each other, calling out advice and celebrating when someone finished with a particularly good time. Are they enjoying this? Commander Zethkar asked in disbelief. Most of them, yeah, Martinez replied. It's challenging, but that's the point. We're building confidence and teaching them they can do more than they think they can. As the morning progressed, the aliens began to realize that what they were witnessing was not an emergency or punishment. This was normal. This was what humans considered basic, everyday military training. And according to Martinez, this was the easy part. The humans finished their morning activities and marched off to eat breakfast, talking and laughing as if they had not just completed what any other species would consider an ordeal of survival. The aliens remained in their observation area, trying to process what they had seen. We must report this immediately, Commander Zethkar said. Our military leadership needs to understand what humans are capable of. Will they believe us? Captain Nix asked. I have recorded everything, and I am not certain I believe it myself. Neither alien could shake the feeling that they had just witnessed something that would change how the galaxy viewed the newest members of the coalition. These were not the primitive beings that everyone had assumed. These were creatures that thrived under conditions that would kill most other species, and this was only their first day of observation. The third day of observation brought new horrors that the aliens had not expected. They had thought the physical training was the worst they would witness, but they were wrong. What the humans called psychological conditioning proved to be even more disturbing than watching recruits throw themselves over barriers and crawl through mud. Commander Zethkar and Captain Nix were positioned in their observation area when they heard the familiar harsh sound that woke the human recruits each morning. But today something was different. Instead of the normal routine, the drill sergeant seemed angry. Why are they displaying aggression? Captain Nix asked, her sensors detecting elevated stress indicators from the human instructors. I am not certain, Commander Zethkar replied. Perhaps there has been some kind of military emergency. Drill Sergeant Martinez approached their position, but his usual friendly demeanor was replaced by something colder and more intense. "Today you're going to see stress inoculation training," he explained. "We need to prepare these recruits for the psychological pressure of combat." The aliens watched as the drill sergeants began what could only be described as psychological warfare against their own recruits. The instructors shouted at the young humans, criticized their every action, and created artificial emergencies that required immediate responses. "This appears to be systematic psychological abuse," Commander Zethkar observed. "Why are they attacking their own personnel?" "It's not abuse," Martinez explained, though his voice remained stern. "We're teaching them to function under stress. In real combat, everything will be chaotic and frightening. If they can't handle pressure here, they'll fail when lives depend on them." The aliens watched in fascination as human after human was subjected to what their species would consider torture. Drill sergeants would position themselves centimeters from a recruit's face and shout criticisms at maximum volume. The young humans were required to respond calmly and correctly while being verbally attacked. "Your species can function under this level of psychological pressure?" Captain Nix asked. "That's the whole point," Martinez replied. "We're not trying to be mean. We're building mental toughness. These recruits need to learn that they can stay calm and think clearly, even when everything around them is falling apart." What disturbed the aliens most was that the human recruits seemed to be adapting to this treatment. After several hours of intensive psychological pressure, they began responding more quickly and confidently. Their stress indicators dropped as they learned to operate normally under conditions that would incapacitate most other species. "They are actually improving under these conditions," Commander Zethkar said in amazement. "Their performance metrics are increasing rather than decreasing." The psychological training continued with exercises that challenged every assumption the aliens had about mental stability. The humans were forced to solve complex problems while being shouted at. They had to make tactical decisions while exhausted and confused. They were required to maintain unit cohesion while being systematically isolated and pressured. "This next exercise is called decision-making under pressure," Martinez explained. "We're going to present them with scenarios where they have to choose between competing priorities." The aliens watched as individual recruits were placed in simulated emergency situations. They had to decide whether to help a wounded comrade or complete a mission objective. They had to choose between personal safety and unit safety. They had to make life or death decisions with incomplete information and time pressure. "These are impossible choices," Captain Nix observed. "There are no correct answers to these scenarios." "That's exactly right," Martinez agreed. "In real combat, there often aren't perfect solutions. We're teaching them to make the best decision they can with the information they have, and then live with the consequences." What shocked the aliens was not just that humans could make such decisions, but that they could do so repeatedly, without suffering complete psychological breakdown. The recruits would complete one impossible scenario, receive immediate criticism of their choices, and then move on to the next challenge. "How do they maintain mental stability?" Commander Zethkar asked. "Any rational being would experience severe psychological trauma from this training." "Some of them do struggle," Martinez admitted. "That's why we have counselors and medical staff available. But most humans are more resilient than they think. We're just helping them discover what they're capable of." The training escalated when the drill sergeants introduced what they called sleep deprivation exercises. The recruits were kept awake for extended periods while being required to perform complex tasks and make important decisions. "This is a violation of basic biological requirements," Captain Nix said, her sensors detecting dangerous stress levels from the human recruits. "Intelligent beings require regular rest periods to function properly. Humans can operate on minimal sleep for limited periods," Martinez explained. "In combat, you don't always get to sleep when you want to. We're teaching them how to stay alert and functional even when they're exhausted." The aliens watched in disbelief as recruits who had been awake for over 30 hours continued to perform physical exercises, solve problems, and follow complex instructions. Their performance was degraded, but they were still functioning at levels that would be impressive for well-rested individuals of most species. "This should not be possible," Commander Zethkar said. "They are operating outside normal biological parameters." The psychological conditioning reached its peak during what the humans called combat simulation exercises. The recruits were placed in realistic scenarios where they had to function as a team while under simulated enemy fire, with artificial casualties and with equipment failures. The aliens watched through their protective barriers as humans crawled through mud while explosive sounds went off around them. They saw recruits carrying wounded comrades while being shouted at by instructors playing the role of enemy forces. They observed young humans making tactical decisions while exhausted, frightened, and confused. They are deliberately recreating the worst possible combat conditions, Captain Nix observed. Why would they subject their own people to this? Because real combat is worse, Martinez replied simply. If they can handle this, they have a better chance of surviving the real thing. What amazed the aliens was that the humans were not just surviving these exercises, they were learning from them. Each repetition made them more efficient, more confident, and more capable of functioning under pressure. Look at their cohesion, Commander Zethkar pointed out. Instead of breaking apart under stress, they are bonding more strongly as a unit. It was true. The shared hardship was creating connections between the recruits that the aliens had never seen before. Humans who had been strangers weeks ago were now working together with a level of trust and coordination that most species required years to develop. We call it esprit de corps, Martinez explained. When people go through difficult experiences together, they form bonds that last a lifetime. These recruits will trust each other with their lives because they know each other's capabilities. The day's training concluded with what the humans called reflection time. The recruits were required to analyze their own performance, identify their mistakes, and develop plans for improvement. Even after hours of physical and psychological stress, they were expected to engage in complex self-evaluation. They are learning from trauma, Captain Nix observed. Instead of being damaged by these experiences, they are using them to become stronger. That's the goal, Martinez agreed. We're not trying to break them. We're trying to show them that they're tougher than they think they are. Most of these recruits will go through their entire military careers without facing anything as difficult as basic training. As the recruits marched back to their barracks, the aliens could see fundamental changes in their behavior. They moved with more confidence. They communicated more efficiently. They showed signs of mental discipline that had not been present at the beginning of their training. These are not the same individuals who began this program, Commander Zethkar said. The humans have created a transformation process that fundamentally alters their psychological makeup. And this is just basic training, Martinez reminded them. This is what we consider the minimum standard for military service. Our special forces units go through training that makes this look easy. The aliens spent that evening reviewing their recordings and trying to understand what they had witnessed. The human training methods violated every principle of psychological safety that the coalition considered fundamental to civilized society. We must contact our governments immediately, Captain Nix said. Our military leadership needs to understand what humans are capable of. More importantly, Commander Zethkar added, they need to understand what humans consider normal. Neither alien could sleep that night. They kept thinking about young humans who had voluntarily submitted to psychological conditioning that would be considered torture on any other world. And these were not elite warriors or specially selected individuals. These were ordinary humans who had simply chosen military service. The weapons training began on the 5th day, and it immediately shattered every assumption the aliens had about civilized warfare. Commander Zethkar and Captain Nix had expected to see advanced energy weapons, sophisticated targeting systems, and the kind of clean, technological combat that modern military forces use throughout the galaxy. Instead, they found themselves watching humans learn to use devices that could only be described as primitive implements of destruction. These are projectile weapons, Commander Zethkar said, studying the devices through his sensors. They function by explosively propelling small metal fragments at high velocity. The kinetic energy transfer must cause massive tissue damage, Captain Nix observed. These weapons are designed to destroy biological matter through mechanical force. Drill Sergeant Martinez was explaining the weapons to the recruits with the same casual tone he used for everything else. This is the M4 carbine, your basic service rifle. It fires a 5.56mm round at approximately 3,100 feet per second. You will learn to clean it, maintain it, and fire it accurately under all conditions. The aliens watched in horror as young humans were handed these instruments of destruction and taught to use them as if they were simple tools. The weapons made loud explosive sounds with each shot, created visible flashes of fire, and filled the air with chemical smoke. "Are there no safety protocols?" Captain Nix asked, her sensors detecting multiple hazardous conditions. "The noise levels alone should cause permanent hearing damage." "They're wearing ear protection," Martinez pointed out, "and everyone follows strict safety rules. But yes, these are serious weapons. They have to be comfortable with them because their lives might depend on it." What disturbed the aliens most was not just the primitive violence of the weapons, but how quickly the humans adapted to using them. Within hours, recruits who had never held a firearm were hitting targets with increasing accuracy. By the end of the day, they were performing complex reloading procedures and clearing weapon malfunctions under time pressure. "They show no signs of psychological trauma from handling these devices," Commander Zethkar observed. "Most species require extensive conditioning to overcome their natural aversion to weapons designed to kill. Humans don't seem to have that aversion," Martinez explained. "We've been making tools and weapons for thousands of years. It's part of our culture." The weapons training escalated quickly. The aliens watched as recruits learned to use explosive devices called grenades that were designed to kill multiple targets simultaneously. They observed training with devices called rocket-propelled grenades that could destroy vehicles and fortifications. These weapons would be classified as war crimes by most coalition species, Captain Nix said quietly. "The indiscriminate nature of explosive devices violates every principle of civilized combat." "Different worlds, different rules," Martinez replied. "Earth has been a dangerous place for a long time. We've had to develop weapons that work against everything, from wild animals to enemy armies. But the real shock came when the aliens were introduced to what humans called close-quarters combat training." They watched in disbelief as recruits were taught to fight using knives, bayonets, and eventually their bare hands. "This is hand-to-hand combat," Martinez explained as they observed humans practicing with combat knives. "Sometimes technology fails or you run out of ammunition. Every soldier needs to know how to fight up close." The aliens were speechless as they watched young humans learning to attack each other with bladed weapons. The training used protective equipment, but the techniques being taught were clearly designed to cause maximum damage to living targets. "They are learning to kill using only their biological systems," Commander Zethkar said in amazement. "No tools, no technology, just physical force and edged weapons." "Combat doesn't always happen at long range," Martinez said. "Sometimes you end up fighting face-to-face with an enemy. Our soldiers need to be ready for that." The unarmed combat training was even more disturbing. The aliens watched as humans learned to use their hands, feet, and entire bodies as weapons. They were taught techniques for breaking bones, cutting off air supply, and causing unconsciousness through direct physical contact. "This appears to be systematic training in how to disable or kill other beings using only natural body parts," Captain Nix observed. "I have never seen anything like this." "It's called martial arts," Martinez explained. "Humans have been developing unarmed combat techniques for thousands of years. Every culture on Earth has its own fighting styles." What amazed the aliens was not just that humans could learn these violent techniques, but that they approached them with the same methodical precision they used for everything else. The recruits practiced their combat moves repeatedly, analyzed their effectiveness, and worked to improve their performance just like any other skill. "They treat violence as a technical subject," Commander Zethkar said. "They study it, practice it, and refine it like any other military capability." The training reached its peak when the drill sergeants introduced live fire exercises. The aliens watched through reinforced barriers as humans moved through simulated combat environments while using real weapons and explosives. "The projectiles they are firing could cause death," Captain Nix said, her voice tight with stress. "How is this considered training rather than combat?" "Strict safety protocols and controlled conditions," Martinez replied. "But yes, these are real weapons with real ammunition. We want them to understand exactly what they're working with." The aliens observed humans advancing under covering fire, assaulting fortified positions and conducting room-clearing operations using live weapons. The noise was tremendous. The smoke and fire created chaotic conditions, and the danger was very real. One mistake could result in casualties among their own personnel, Commander Zethkar observed. Yet they perform these exercises routinely. "Accidents are rare, but they do happen," Martinez admitted. "It's a calculated risk. The training has to be realistic enough to prepare them for actual combat. During one exercise, the aliens witnessed something that challenged their understanding of human psychology. A recruit made an error that could have resulted in injury to his teammates. Instead of stopping the exercise or treating it as a failure, the drill sergeants used it as a teaching moment. Mistakes happen in combat, Martinez explained to the recruits afterward. The important thing is to learn from them and make sure they don't happen again when lives are really at stake. The human who had made the error was not punished or removed from training. He was given additional instruction and allowed to continue. The aliens realized that humans viewed even dangerous mistakes as part of the learning process. They accept risk as an inevitable part of training, Captain Nix said. Most species would consider this level of danger completely unacceptable. Different worlds create different attitudes toward risk, Martinez replied. Earth is a dangerous place. We've learned that trying to eliminate all risk just makes you less prepared for reality. The weapons training concluded with what the humans called field exercises, multi-day simulations, where recruits had to live outdoors while conducting military operations. The aliens watched through remote sensors as humans spent days in the wilderness, sleeping on the ground, eating basic rations, and conducting combat missions in all weather conditions. They are voluntarily subjecting themselves to primitive survival conditions while maintaining complex military operations, Commander Zethkar observed. This combination of physical hardship and tactical thinking should be impossible. It's challenging, Martinez agreed. But it teaches them that they can operate effectively, even when everything is working against them. The aliens recorded humans fighting simulated battles in rain, snow, and extreme heat. They watched recruits navigate through forests and swamps while carrying heavy equipment and maintaining combat readiness. They observed young humans who had been civilians weeks earlier, performing coordinated military operations that would challenge experienced soldiers from most other species. These are not elite troops, Captain Nix said, reviewing her recordings. These are ordinary humans receiving basic training. That's right, Martinez confirmed. This is just the foundation. After basic training, they'll go to advanced schools where they'll learn specialized skills for their military roles. Advanced schools? Commander Zethkar asked. This training becomes more intensive? Much more, Martinez replied. Basic training just teaches them to be soldiers. Advanced training teaches them to be experts in their specific jobs: infantry, armor, aviation, special operations. The mention of special operations caught both aliens' attention. What is special operations? Captain Nix asked. Martinez hesitated for a moment. That's training for our elite units. Rangers, Special Forces, Navy SEALs. Those programs are considerably more challenging than what you've seen here. More challenging? Commander Zethkar could barely process the concept. What you have shown us would be considered elite training by any coalition standard. Different standards, Martinez said simply. What you've seen is just basic infantry training. Our special operations units train for missions that require capabilities beyond what regular soldiers need. The journey back to Coalition. Space felt different to Commander Zethkar and Captain Nix. The familiar comfort of their environmental controls and the gentle hum of advanced starship systems seemed fragile after witnessing the raw capability of human military training. Both aliens spent most of the trip reviewing their recordings, trying to organize observations that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. How do we explain what we have seen? Captain Nix asked as they approached the Coalition capital station. Our language does not have words for what humans consider normal. Commander Zethkar was studying his crystalline structure in the reflection of the viewport. After days of watching humans deliberately subject themselves to physical stress, his own delicate form seemed almost absurdly vulnerable. We report exactly what we observed. Whether they believe us is not our responsibility. The debriefing session was scheduled for the main Coalition military headquarters, with representatives from dozens of member species attending. Admiral Corksvan had assembled the galaxy's most experienced military leaders to hear about human training methods. Welcome back, Admiral Corksvan said as the two observers entered the briefing room. We are eager to hear about your experiences with our newest allies. What did you learn about human military capabilities? Commander Zethkar activated his holographic display system. Admiral, what we observed challenges fundamental assumptions about military training. Biological limitations and the nature of intelligent warfare. Please proceed, the Admiral said, gesturing to the assembled officers. The presentation began with recordings of the first morning's physical training. The reaction in the room was immediate and dramatic. Several species representatives activated their emergency medical protocols when they saw humans running at high speed in dangerous environmental conditions. Stop the recording, called out General Vextara of the Silicon Collective. Are we witnessing some kind of punishment detail? These humans appear to be under severe physical duress. This is normal daily training, Captain Nix explained. Every human soldier performs these activities every morning. They call it physical fitness. Impossible, declared Marshal Quintel of the Aquatic Federation. No species can sustain that level of physical stress without permanent damage. Our medical experts classify such activity as biological torture. Commander Zethkar continued the presentation, showing the obstacle course training. The room fell silent as they watched humans deliberately throwing themselves over barriers, crawling under dangerous obstacles, and performing activities that required them to ignore their basic survival instincts. This cannot be authentic footage, observed Director Lexander of the Synthetic Alliance. The probability of survival for such activities is below acceptable parameters for any rational being. We have verified the authenticity of all recordings, Captain Nix replied. What you are seeing is accurate documentation of human training methods. The presentation moved to the psychological conditioning segments. The alien leaders watched in growing alarm as human drill sergeants subjected their own recruits to intensive stress training, sleep deprivation, and decision-making exercises under pressure. This is systematic psychological warfare being conducted against their own people, General Vexitara said, her mechanical voice registering extreme concern. Such methods are prohibited by every civilized military code. The humans explained that this training prepares their soldiers for actual combat conditions, Commander Zethkar reported. They believe that experiencing stress during training makes their soldiers more capable during real operations. Barbaric, muttered Ambassador Telvin of the Energy Collective. No wonder they survived on a death world. They appear to be naturally adapted to conditions that would destroy normal life forms. The room erupted in discussion when the presentation reached the weapons training segments. Watching humans learn to use projectile weapons, explosives, and close combat techniques caused several species representatives to request immediate medical assistance for stress-related disorders. These weapons are designed to cause maximum tissue damage through kinetic force, Marshal Quintel observed. Most coalition species have banned such devices as crimes against sentient life. The humans view them as necessary tools, Captain Nix explained. They have a saying, violence is the last argument of kings. They prepare for situations where other options have failed. Admiral Corksvan was studying the recordings with particular intensity. The efficiency with which these humans adapt to weapons training is remarkable. Most species require years of conditioning to overcome their natural aversion to instruments of destruction. Humans appear to have no such aversion, Commander Zethkar reported. They treat weapons as tools, and violence as a technical skill to be mastered like any other military capability. The presentation concluded with footage from the live fire exercises and field training. The assembled military leaders watched in silence as humans conducted realistic combat operations using actual weapons and explosives in uncontrolled environments. The risk tolerance demonstrated in these exercises exceeds anything in our military databases, Director Lixander observed. They accept casualty probabilities that we would consider unacceptable for actual combat operations. And this is what they consider basic training, Captain Nix added. The humans indicated that their elite units undergo significantly more challenging preparation. The room fell silent. Admiral Corksvan was the first to speak. More challenging? What you have shown us would be considered elite training by our most advanced military units. That was our reaction as well, Commander Zethkar said. When we asked about their special operations forces, the human instructors indicated that those programs make basic training look easy by comparison. The implications of this statement created immediate panic among several species representatives. Emergency medical teams had to be called for 3 different ambassadors who suffered stress reactions from Contemplating what human elite training might involve, we need to discuss this. Information in private session, Admiral Corksvan announced. This briefing is classified at the highest levels. No information about human military capabilities is to be shared outside this room. After the formal presentation ended, smaller groups of military leaders began intense discussions about what they had learned. Commander Zethkar and Captain Nix found themselves answering detailed questions about every aspect of human training. "Are you certain these humans are not genetically modified for combat?" asked General Vextara. "Natural evolution should not produce beings capable of such performance." "They appeared to be unmodified biological entities," Captain Nix replied. "Their capabilities seem to result from adaptation to their hostile homeworld environment." "This changes everything," muttered Ambassador Telvin. "We have been treating humans as a primitive species that needs protection and guidance. Instead, we have admitted beings into the coalition who could potentially defeat our combined military forces." The discussions continued for hours. Military strategists tried to understand how human capabilities would affect coalition defense planning. Diplomatic experts worried about the political implications of having such powerful allies. Medical specialists struggled to comprehend how human biology could function under such extreme conditions. Admiral Corksvan called Commander Zethkar and Captain Nix into a private meeting that evening. "Your observations have created a significant problem," he said. "Most of our member species are now requesting immediate reassessment of human military potential. Are they concerned about human aggression?" Commander Zethkar asked. "Not aggression," the Admiral replied. "Capability. Several species are suggesting that humans should be reclassified from developing allies to potential strategic threats." Captain Nix was surprised by this reaction. "The humans showed no hostile intentions toward coalition forces. They invited us to observe their training as a gesture of cooperation. That may be the most disturbing aspect of all," Admiral Corksvan said. "They voluntarily demonstrated capabilities that most species would consider state secrets. Either they are incredibly naive about military security, or they are so confident in their abilities that they see no threat in revealing them." The meeting concluded with orders for both observers to prepare detailed classified reports for their respective governments. The information about human training methods would be shared only with the highest levels of military leadership. Over the following weeks, the effects of their reports rippled through coalition space. Species that had viewed humans as junior partners began reassessing their diplomatic positions. Military planners started developing new strategies that accounted for human capabilities. Intelligence services began gathering additional information about Earth's military forces. Commander Zethkar received a message from his homeworld's military command 6 weeks after his return. "Your report has been reviewed by our highest military council," the message read. "We are implementing immediate changes to our alliance strategies regarding humans. All Velthari forces are to treat human military units as potentially superior allies rather than primitive newcomers." Captain Nix received similar communications from the Etherian Navy.